Welcome to Narrative Inc. Have you ever felt that you're not getting anywhere with your story, or that because you aren't getting any sales or traction, that this means you're a bad writer or author? Well, let me ask you, who are some of the most famous and well-written authors that you know? Tolkien, George R. R. Martin, Agatha Christine, Emily Dickinson, and Brandon Sanderson are just a handful of authors who took years to get their work done and published. Some didn't even get published or known till after their death. Tolkien took 12 years to write The Lord of the Rings and another 5 years to publish it, but it is considered the grandfather of modern fantasy. This story is one of the things that most people turn to when they're talking about the origins of modern fantasy and even storytelling. Brandon Sanderson, one of my favorite authors and a very prolific writer, in 2002 wrote The Way of Kings Prime, which was the original draft of The Way of Kings, the first and considered by many the best of the Stormlight Archive, his magnum opus. It was the 13th novel that he wrote. The updated version of The Way of Kings wasn't even fully published until 2010, a full 8 years later. George R. R. Martin, he sold his first story in 1970 at 21 years old, but he didn't come up with anything or even sell Game of Thrones, his most well-known and famous series, until 1996. Sure, he wrote plenty of TV pilots, but he didn't even sell a lot of those, and many of them weren't even made if he did sell them. He was not making much as an author. In fact, he was more of a middle-lister who just kind of got some for his writing. He didn't even become a bestseller until 2005 with the fourth book in the A Song of Ice and Fire series, A Feast of Crows. But now this series is considered by many the best multimedia fantasy franchise. But that took years, not only to even just get to the point where it's at right now, but even just from the original Game of Thrones in 1996 to A Feast of Crows in 2005. 9 years after he'd finally become a well-known published author to finally become a bestseller. Stephen King published his first story in 1967. When he was later on working on a novel, he decided to throw it out. He thought his writing was literal trash and he had no other ideas. But his wife took it out of the trash and helped him finish it. Then in 1973, he sold that novel, which was titled Carrie, which is considered a classic for a lot of King fans. Agatha Christine. Her first book was rejected 7 times, but now she's sold more than 2 billion copies, and her stories are still getting adapted to this day. Emily Dickinson. She had only about 10 poems and a letter published during her lifetime. But after she died, her younger sister discovered a collection of nearly 1,800 poems, and her first full volume was published 4 years after her death. F. Scott Fitzgerald. Although he achieved temporary success and fortune during his time, he only received critical acclaim after his death. But now he is widely regarded as one of the greatest American writers of the 20th century. Charles Bukowski. Over 20 books of poetry and short stories that weren't even published till after his death in 1994. Geoffrey Chaucer, The Canterbury Tales. J.R.R. Tolkien, The Silmarillion, and The Children of Húrin are just a few examples of his work that wasn't published till after he died. I could go on about the dozens and hundreds of authors and artists who didn't even sell a book or a painting or a script or whatever their art was till after they died. That doesn't even begin to mention the stories that have been brought to us just from the estates of these different authors. There are so many authors out there that didn't even get some of their most popular stuff done or their most influential pieces done till after they had died, or just worked on it for years and years. If you've been working on your story or project for a while, just remember that you probably have a lot of time left to work on it. You have a great opportunity now to make your best work your best work. Make a lot of mistakes and improve yourself. Even if you aren't a bestseller in the next 10 years, you still have time. I know it's hard. I struggle with it as well. I want to be a full-time creator and author who is able to support my life solely based on my writing, but in reality, it could take a while or never even happen in this life. What can we learn from these prolific and famous authors? It takes time. It's difficult to stick with your creative projects because you may think that they aren't any good. Maybe you'll literally throw them in the trash, or that you're just going to fail. Well, the truth is, you will fail. But don't deprive the world of your stories. Get them done, work hard, and don't give up.